November 20th, 1986, Canton, Massachusetts. 14-year-old Shaun Ouillette is beginning his freshman year. His family had just recently moved to the area, and like any teenager, he was eager to fit in. But what started as an innocent effort to connect with his classmates would turn dark and horrifying. This is the story of how a boy with a bright future crossed paths with a classmate harboring deadly intentions. A story of manipulation, cruelty, and a brutal crime that left a family shattered and a community haunted. This is Friendship Turned Fatal, the murder of Shaun Ouillette. Hey, y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potterworth. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our Catalan-speaking friends in Spain, France, Italy, and anywhere else,
Okay.
benvingut.
Very nice.
There you go.
Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to subscribe to Hitched to Homicide, then like, rate, and review the podcast so other people who are just like you and love true crime can find us.
Yep.
And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. I know I sound like a broken record at the beginning of every podcast. I try to get through all the important stuff really quick.
Get it out of the way. Yeah.
If you want true crime with us every single day of the week, please go join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Just go to Facebook, type in H2H, In-Laws and Outlaws, answer a couple questions, and you're in. We've got lots of new family members in there.
Yes, we do.
So welcome.
Oh.
I did it in English.
Yeah, that was very good.
Go join.
Yeah.
I post photos and other information in there. It's a great group of supportive people, very funny true crime folks.
Yep.
And we do really like each other a lot. You can find us on Instagram at Hitched to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And we have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee.
Send it.
He drinks it every single episode, especially today. You can find that link in our show notes.
Yep.
You can also send us a text. The link to that is at the top of the show notes where it says, send Chris and Rob a text.
Please do.
Well, the reason I said Rob's drinking lots of coffee, we're in the middle of a snowstorm here in Kentucky. Like right this very moment as we record this episode, a winter storm is raging outside. Blair is on a rampage.
Yeah, we're trying to get through it before we have a power outage.
We're afraid we might lose power.
Yeah.
So I decided to do a case that has a winter storm element to it. I want to get right to it. Before I get started, let me thank these sources: the Boston Globe, the Patriot Ledger, the Commonwealth versus Rod Matthews, the Canton Citizen, WCVB in Boston, the Boston Herald, Find a Grave, CBS News, and the True Crime podcast, True Crime All the Time.
All right. Well, you ready to do it?
That was a lot, and I was rolling through them.
Well, then let's do it.
Rod Matthews was born on July 7th, 1972. He was the unplanned child of a rocky marriage.
He was an oops baby.
Not a good start.
I was an oops baby.
Yeah, but your parents didn't have a rocky marriage.
It's true.
And Rod's parents did.
All right.
When he's 4.5, his parents temporarily split up. This is the first of their 7 separations, each of which lasted at least a month. Now, if you separate 7 different times, it might be time just to say so long,
Yeah,
right?
what's the definition of insanity? Yeah.
Doing the same thing over and over again.
Expecting different results.
Yeah.
Yep.
But his father owned a carpeting and flooring business in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and he would have dinner with his wife and his 3 kids in Canton and then go back to his apartment in Dorchester. So they kind of lived separate lives.
Right.
And later, Rod is going to say that the fact that his father was unfaithful to his mother caused tension and hostility in their home growing up.
Imagine that.
Go figure.
How dare him?
He said he didn't feel close to his family, and growing up in this environment contributed to his stunted emotional state. Does that sound like somebody who's trying to make excuses or what?
Yeah.
Growing up, Rod was slow in learning to talk, and his mother sent him to a speech therapist. Throughout his schooling, his verbal skills and vocabulary were below grade level, so he's just a little bit behind, and he has trouble articulating his thoughts. So whatever he's thinking in his head, he just can't explain it very well.
Right.
But I don't think most kids can. I think that's really hard for kids to do. It's hard for some adults to articulate what's going on in their head.
Sure.
But as a child, Rod hid and cried when adults tried to take his photo. I do this as well. I hate to have my photograph taken.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to post any photos of my wife.
That's not true.
No.
I just have to have approval. And every woman and girl, and especially teenage girl, knows what I'm talking about. You take a photo, let me see that before you post it.
And the first thing that I learned was that when you're taking a photo of a girl or a woman is that the camera angle has to be high.
Yeah, you hold it high and look down.
And look down.
You never want to look up. You just give everybody a double chin. What's the point?
I didn't know that. Yeah.
There are whole courses out there on how to look good when you take pictures.
Yeah.
And I'm bad at all of them, so I just like to avoid it. But as Rod got into his teenage years, he wanted the attention. And Rod was a prankster. He was a class clown. And when he's in elementary school, he would do some odd things, like he got down on all fours and barked like a dog.
Bark like a dog. Sorry.
He also would wander over to the window and just stare outside, like he was kind of catatonic. He was sent to the principal's office a lot, and the older Rod got, the more trouble he got into. And Rod never got upset in the principal's office. And this was a man who was known to make his students cry.
Really?
But the more he shouted at Rod, the more Rod smiled.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Later, psychiatrists will describe this smirk as a defensive shield against outside pressures and inner anxiety. So if you're anxious, just smile, which makes me think of that horror movie where everybody's smiling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That one freaked me out. And apparently now there's a second one.
Uh-oh.
I do love horror movies, though. So if you have any good suggestions, send them my way. And if we have power, I'll watch them. Things didn't get better in middle school for Rod. He was given 15 detentions and 3 one-day suspensions during 7th and 8th grade for refusing to cooperate in class, for screaming obscenities, and throwing bananas in the cafeteria.
Okay.
Were you ever in detention, Rob? Did you ever have to go to detention?
No, I never had detention. I was only in the principal's office one time because David Fishbaugh smacked a book over my head.
Or David.
Yeah. No, we're good friends. He smacked a social studies book over my head and put me down on the ground. I came up and punched him in the nose. And yeah, so we ended up in the principal's office.
Don't get the red hair angry.
Yeah.
Catches on fire.
You wouldn't like me if I were angry.
Even when the red hair goes a little bit gray.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But when Rod goes to Canton High School, by the way, Rod is a little bit of a redhead.
Really?
Yeah, he's a redhead.
Oh, great. Give us all a bad name.
Well, he wears his hair in like a punk, like a mohawk that he sort of paints red, like real red and black.
See, the biggest thing of being a redhead is like in your entire life, every movie, the redhead is always the geek nerd. And I never understood that.
What are you trying to say, honey?
I'm a geek nerd.
No, you're not. No, you're not. All the redheads I know are wonderful. I know lots of them, and they're all wonderful.
Yes.
But when Rod goes to Canton High School, he wrote as a freshman that he hoped to take over his father's business someday. So even amongst all this bizarre behavior, he has this forethought to want to work for his dad, who he didn't like because he was a cheater. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But Rod also, I loved this. Rod liked to cook, and he would watch Julia Child on PBS and write down her recipes.
You must save the liver.
I'm Julia Child.
That's the best bit.
At St. John's Church, where he was taking his Christian doctrine classes, so like his catechism classes, perhaps he's Catholic, he's suspended for misbehavior at church.
If the church can't deal with it.
If Jesus doesn't want you, we got trouble.
We got issues here.
He goes back during 9th grade, but mostly he just wrote atheistic comments in his textbook.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this kid was just total rebel.
He's really got it. He's having a rough time.
Yeah.
And his parents sort of acted like all of this was normal. His mom, Janice, she's like a regular picking Rod up after detention.
Oh, Rod.
And one night at parents' night at the middle school, before he even heads off to high school, Rod's parents asked if, should we be concerned about him? And they're told by the school administrator, quote, he's a good kid. It's just his age, end quote.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not his age.
No.
Because by the time he makes it to high school, his pranks are becoming more like felonies. He collected firecrackers when he would go on family trips. And I don't know if that means that, fireworks are illegal in their state.
Right.
In Kentucky, you have to cross over into Tennessee to get the good stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
And then at Tennessee, they have to cross over into Kentucky to get the good bourbon. So it's an even exchange, right?
It's fair trade-off.
And those two things go so well together, drinking and fireworks. I'm just kidding.
What could possibly go wrong?
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah.
But he collected firecrackers on these family trips. But now he's turning into an out-and-out pyromaniac. He lit newspapers on fire when he's sitting at home. And he sets fires around town.
Wow.
Then he began to torture animals, putting firecrackers into the mouths of fish.
Oh, geez.
And neuropsychiatrists say that setting fires and mistreatment of animals are classic symptoms of psychosis, and if it's left to flourish, turns into more serious, violent acts.
Wow.
And we know this. It's all the makings of a serial killer, right?
Yes, it is.
And Rod was sort of pulling away from the outside world. He became preoccupied with being clean, and he took showers all the time.
A little OCD.
And as part of his withdrawal from society, he had this form of being indifferent to pain. He refused anesthesia for 3 fillings with his dentist.
Really?
Yeah.
So he enjoyed pain.
I don't know if he enjoyed it or he didn't feel it. I don't know. But one time a huge plant fell on his head while he was laying tile for his dad's flooring business, and he barely even noticed. And these other workers are rushing to his side. Are you okay? Are you okay?
Really?
And he was like, yeah, what happened?
Wow.
Then at the beginning of his freshman year, Rod's parents separated again. It's September of 1986. And for the first time, his mom and dad come to him and say, we're breaking up. After 7 times being separated. And according to his parents, he took the news well and that, quote, nothing seemed to bother him, end quote. Well, if he's getting fillings with no anesthesia, with no Novocaine, nothing's bothering him.
Yeah, an announcement from your parents are getting a divorce, that's nothing.
Yeah.
Here, hold my beer.
Yeah. Then in mid-October, Rod's sister rented a documentary film for him. It was called Faces of Death. I have never heard of this, and I was an 80s kid. I've never heard of this.
What is it? Faces
of Death. It showed death by torture, accident, and war. It's torture and execution of humans and animals.
Oh.
And according to one psychiatrist, it inspired Rod to, quote, see what it was like to kill someone, end quote.
Wow.
A few days after this, in health class, Coach Tracomie's health class, he leaves an anonymous question. It was a way for teens to ask questions in private and anonymously ask about sex education or other health questions. So they have this, this box. You can write a question anonymously.
Sure.
But when Rod puts this question into the box, Coach Tracomie, who was the Boston Globe's Division III Coach of the Year in 1987 in football, He saw Rod write this statement and slip it in the box, and it said, quote, "I like to light fires and I want to kill the people I hate," end quote.
Gee whiz.
And the day after handing in this little letter, Rod asked the coach if he'd read it. And when the coach attempted to discuss it, saying, "Are you serious?" Rod shrugged and walked away. And the coach told him, "Good, because both of those are felonies." You know, they kind of laughed it off.
Yeah.
But after this discussion, Coach Tracomi did not follow up or ask any more questions.
Yeah, well, that wouldn't happen today.
It would not happen today. Red flags everywhere, right?
Yeah, big time.
Rod's parents know they've kind of lost touch with their son, but they believe that something else is happening, something they can't control. You see, Rod is on Ritalin, methylphenidate.
Okay.
It's for kids and adults who suffer from attention deficit disorder, which usually manifests as hyperactivity. And Rod began taking this when he's in 4th grade because his teacher told his parents he needs to be medicated to calm him down.
Right.
Well, if he's on all fours barking like a dog, you know?
Yeah.
But after he started taking it 3 weeks later, his teacher calls his mom and says, "Is Rod taking his meds? Because he sure doesn't act like it." And he was. He was taking his medicine.
Wow.
Now, according to a 2022 study published in Pediatrics, about 3.3 million children in the United States are prescribed ADHD medication, which is roughly 5 out of every 100 kids. And in 2022, about 0.8% of kids in grades 8, 10, and 12 reported using Ritalin.
Man.
So they keep him on this for the next 5 years. But Rod took a really small dose because he complained that it made him dizzy. And he would start each school year not taking the meds, and then he would end up taking them after his teachers would complain.
Okay.
Now, in the fall of 1986, when he has started high school, there's a new kid at Canton High School. His name is Shaun Ouillette. Shaun Rennie Ouillette was born on January 28, 1972 in Fairfield, California. His parents soon moved back to their home state of Massachusetts. His parents divorced when he's 4, and his mother remarried twice. And the family moved a lot because his mom was always looking for a better job. Inside the state of Massachusetts, they lived in the towns of Hudson, Brockton, Marlborough, Northborough, and Hull before settling in Canton.
Okay.
She was looking for a better job all the time. And, you know, she was married, divorced, and married. And then she's just really just trying to do right by her kids. I really think she is.
Right.
But because they moved around so much, Shaun attended a new school every year. And Shaun was a friendly, sweet kid. His mom always said that he reminded her of Opie from the Andy Griffith Show. Somebody else looked like Opie growing up.
Who was that?
You. I'm going to show pictures of that.
I had longer hair, though.
Not when you were little.
That's true.
Maybe you did have a little bit longer hair when you were. It was the 70s and not the 50s and 60s. When was Mayberry RFD on? The Andy Griffith Show, sorry.
Into the 50s, into the 60s.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, you were a little kid in the 70s.
Yeah.
So you had 70s hair. And then you really had 70s hair.
And then I had 80s hair and that mullet. Yeah, baby.
And I just looked like Marsha Brady my whole life. That's it.
Oh.
But Shaun looks like Opie. He's got that sweet personality. He loved to eat, and he called himself the fat kid. And Rod, what I haven't told you about Rod, is that he's 5'3" and weighs 96 pounds. And Shaun is 5'10" and weighs 165 pounds.
Mercy.
Shaun played hockey, and he even named his German Shepherd O'Reilly after Bruins star Terry O'Reilly.
Oh, really?
And even though he was tall at 14, he wasn't all that interested in girls. He's really close to his younger sister, Yvonne, who has cerebral palsy, and he would wheel her every morning from their apartment in Canton across the street to the Massachusetts hospital school. He's the one who kind of took care of his sister and his sister Yvonne's wheelchair, because according to his mom, he was really handy. He was always fixing this wheelchair.
Gotcha.
And Shaun also enjoyed fishing, hockey, baseball, basketball, and building forts. I mean, what 14-year-old kid doesn't like to do all of those things?
Yeah,
like making forts.
That's what we did when we were 14, yeah.
Yeah. But all the moving around affected his grades, and just like Rod, Shaun was on Ritalin. And it's important to note that they were both put on Ritalin, and neither one of them was in therapy. But Shaun had fallen so far behind, he was actually in danger of failing 7th grade in the town of Hull, where he was living at the time. And he'd been suspended for dropping a stink bomb down a stairwell. Then, when her mom found herself unable to provide housing for the kids, meaning they were homeless, and they had to go live with their father in Brookline, Massachusetts. But Shaun's father thinks that while he was at Brookline, that school system actually cared about Shaun's emotional well-being, and they placed him in group therapy when his counselors thought he was too immature.
Oh.
They also sent daily progress reports to Shaun's father. And Shaun responds really well to this. He changed his study habits. He pulled up his grades just in time for his mom to get subsidized apartment in Canton for families of handicapped persons.
Okay.
And she came back and got her kids, and group therapy went away. Now, when Shaun got to Galvin Middle School in Canton, he was a fish out of water all over again. Most of the students at Canton came from money, and they teased him about his weight and the fact that he had an earring. Shaun was bullied, like really bullied, not to mention they made fun of his clothes. He wasn't fashionable because his family didn't have much money.
Sure.
And again, his grades dropped, and again, he was earmarked as a behavior problem by his teachers. And when he entered Canton High School the very next year, Shaun was as lonely as he had ever been. The friends he did have in middle school went to vocational school instead of high school. Like they went off to learn how to be carpenters and plumbers and that kind of thing instead of doing trigonometry.
Right.
And Shaun was having a hard time making or even finding friends. But there was one kid who was friendly, Rod Matthews.
There you go.
Shaun brought Rod home with him one day after school when these first two started hanging out together. But Shaun's mom, Janine, caught Rod wedging the family cat's mouth open with a toothpick.
What?
Yeah, he's torturing the animals.
Yeah. Gosh.
Then on November 17th, 1986, Shaun told his mother and his stepdad he was saving up his money to buy some firecrackers from Rod. And they actually gave him permission on one condition. You can buy these firecrackers from Rod, but don't do it on school property.
Right.
Go over to his house. Don't do it at school because you'll get in trouble.
Sure.
And speaking of trouble, Rod at this point has stopped taking his Ritalin medication cold turkey without telling anyone.
Wow. You're not supposed to just stop taking that kind of medication.
No.
Cold turkey, right? Because it does affect you.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know.
I mean, it builds up in your system and you need to titer down. You need to come off of it slowly. Okay. There are a lot of drugs that you need to come off slowly, and that is one of them.
All right.
But since watching that video where people are being tortured and killed, Rod wanted to know what it was like to kill someone, and he talked about it with his friends, in addition to writing that anonymous note in health class. He discussed how and who he might murder with two other boys, Robbie Peterson and Jonathan Cash. Yes, his name is Jonathan Cash.
Hey, Johnny.
And he doesn't go by Johnny.
Imagine that.
But just like the coach, his friends, his two friends, when he talks about killing somebody, they think he's joking. You know, and think about it. How many times a day do you say things like, I'm going to kill you if you do that? I'm going to kill her.
Right.
Or she's trying to kill me, which is what I usually say about my children. They're trying to kill me. I've said that for 30 years
There
now.
you go. Yep. It'll never change.
But at first, Rod told Jonathan and Robbie that he wanted to kill a kid named Josh Tordoff, a kid who could read faster than he did. Then it was Chris Petrescu. Rod actually invited Chris to his house, but Robbie Peterson warned Chris behind Rod's back. He said, don't go home with Rod.
Yeah.
So I think in the back of their head, they were like, he's not right.
Right. Yep.
He ain't right. Don't go over there.
Yep.
Finally, Rod decided that Shaun Ouillette was the kid he was going to kill. Quote, he bugged me. He called me names, end quote, which I have a hard time believing.
Yeah.
But Rod made his plans, and then he asked Shaun to come to his house to set off firecrackers. Remember, Shaun's really excited. He's been saving his money. And he was also so excited that he told his neighbor, a kid named Jamie Bell, that he was going over there. And Jamie questioned the whole thing, like, why are you going to Rod's house?
Yeah.
And Shaun tells him, because we're friends now. And he was really excited to be invited to Rod's house. By the way, Rod lived in a really nice house. There was a pool in the backyard. I mean, his parents gave him everything.
Sure.
He wanted to be one of the cool kids. Shaun wants to be one of the cool kids. And hanging out at Rod's house is how he's going to be a cool kid.
Okay.
So Shaun agreed to go to Rod's house after school on November 19th, 1986. But just like today, there was a massive snowstorm. And the snowfall was so heavy that school was canceled that day. Now, that doesn't happen in New England all that often because they're different than we are in Kentucky.
Yeah.
They're prepared for this weather, right? We aren't. But school was canceled that day, so they rescheduled for the next day. And on the next day, Shaun rode the bus home with Rod. That's called foreshadowing.
Uh-oh. Here we go.
Now, the two of them are in Rod's basement shooting pool. It's November 20th, 3 p.m., when Rod, who knew Shaun liked to build forts, said, we should go look for a place to build a fort. And they go to this area called the Pits before it gets dark. He's like, let's go to the Pits before it gets dark. And as they're putting on their winter coats to go out in the snow, Rod tells Shaun, hold up. And he goes to his sister's room and gets one of his sister's Louisville Slugger softball bats, saying he needed to return it to someone.
Yeah.
Now, Rod walked ahead of Shaun in this really deep snow. They're both wearing sneakers, but Shaun was wearing high tops. And as they get into the woods, and after about 15 minutes, Rod asks Shaun to walk in front of him. Change places with me. And he said that it was because his feet were cold and he wanted to walk in Shaun's footsteps.
Okay.
And then Rod said to himself, if I'm going to do it, I better do it now. So he's walking in these footsteps, so there's not two sets of footprints in the snow.
Yep.
And when he gets his courage up, that's when he smashed Shaun in the back of the head with the softball bat.
Wow.
And Shaun fell to his knees and said, quote, God help me, end quote, which broke my heart.
Yeah.
Now, Rod's later going to say, quote, I couldn't believe I was doing this. I felt nervous, end quote. He said he blacked out for about 20 seconds, and then he hit Shaun 3 or 4 more times until he was sure that Shaun was dead.
Gee whiz.
Now, in Rod's sock was a kitchen knife because his plan was to cut off Shaun's arms and legs.
What?
But after bludgeoning him in the head, he decided it would be too gory. So he wiped off the bat in the snow. He carried it with him to his friend Robbie Peterson's house. And when he arrives, he tells Robbie very matter-of-factly, I just killed Shaun. And Robbie didn't believe him, which I get.
Yeah.
He's like, no way, man. You're full of it.
Yeah. Why would you?
Right.
Yeah.
So Rod grabs him by the arm and takes him to see the dead body, to see Shaun's dead body.
Man.
And when they get back to Robbie's house, Rod takes the Louisville Slugger and goes home. And after this, Robbie could barely eat, and he only slept with the lights on.
Yeah.
Rod has traumatized his friend, Robbie.
Right.
Now, remember, they're only 14. 14, which is crazy to me.
Gosh, at 14, I was still eating dirt. She was.
You were not.
I know.
When he was 14, he had a band. I have pictures.
All right. I had a band that was eating dirt.
But when Shaun never came home on the 20th, his mom, Janine, was so worried, and search parties were formed, including state police, the Boy Scouts, employees of all these local businesses. They're out looking high and low for him. And that night, Rod called Jonathan Cash after he's left his friend Robbie. He calls Jonathan and tells him the details of the murder. And Jonathan thinks he's full of crap.
Right.
Even when Robbie says, no, dude, it's true. Jonathan still doesn't believe it. He thinks the two of them are like pulling his leg.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at 14, too. I mean, why would you believe that?
Yeah. I mean, Rod's always been different. You know, he's a kid who gets in trouble. He's a prankster. You know, he's saying this.
Yeah.
Can't be true. He's just lying.
He wants attention.
Yeah. Meanwhile, everybody's out looking for Shaun, and his mother has a dream that she sees his dead body. She can see him lying face down in the woods.
Wow.
And if that isn't a mother's intuition, I don't know what is.
Man.
And Rod is desperate. He's desperate for his buddies, especially Jonathan, to believe that he killed Shaun. And the only way for Rod to convince him was to go back to the body again. And 6 days after Shaun is murdered, the three of them, Rod, Robbie, and Jonathan, walk to the area known as the pits. And Jonathan stopped 10 feet away from the body because he recognized the red shirt and the green field jacket that Shaun always wore. And Rod said to them, quote, I know you guys won't say anything. You don't want to be next, end quote.
Wow.
Now, later that night, when one of Shaun's friends calls, Jamie Bell, the same kid who asked Shaun why he was going over to Rod's house. He's like, why are you going to Rod's house? You know?
Yeah.
Rod tells him Shaun never came over that day. He tells Jamie, yeah, I know. He said he was coming over. He never came over that day.
Right.
But police discovered that Rod was the last person to see Shaun. And he's questioned not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times.
Really?
Rod was questioned 4 times just on day 1. Yeah. He denied having any knowledge of Shaun's whereabouts and said he hadn't seen him all day. He was questioned again 2 days later. Why? Well, the bus driver who dropped the two of them off read about Shaun's disappearance and said she saw him get off the bus with Rod.
Uh-oh.
And as he's talking to police, by the way, he's as cool as a cucumber. He is a cool customer. Like, police were like, this is like a seasoned criminal in here talking with us.
And he's 14.
14.
Gee whiz.
So at first he tells police Shaun never came over, which is the story that his mother actually corroborates because she didn't see Shaun in the house.
Right.
But then on November 22nd, this school bus driver tells police that she saw Rod and Shaun that day. And only then, during this 4th interview, did Rod admit that they played pool in his basement. And he tells police, I only lied because I was covering for Shaun. He has run away, probably back to Hull, which is a town.
Okay.
But during this time is when Rod takes Jonathan and Robbie to see the body.
Right.
And after they see it together, by the way, they go to the woods, to the pit, after a pep rally at school. And when they leave the body, they walk downtown and go to a pizzeria and eat and wait for Jonathan's mom to drive them all home later. I mean, these are like the kids who go to the mall and hang out, right?
Wow.
And when Jonathan gets home, he goes to his room. He begins to shake. But Jonathan and Robbie were unwilling to confide in adults about what they'd seen. They both avoided being alone with Rod, and the two of them formed a pact saying that if one of them is murdered, the other would go to the police. Now, can you imagine being a little kid and worrying that you were going to die and you had to make a pact with your friend?
Yeah.
Jonathan sleeping with a knife under his pillow, and Robbie wouldn't go to school unless his older sister drove him there. And when his sister left early one morning without him, he stayed home. And when he didn't show up for school, Jonathan panics and calls Robbie's mom from school to ask if he was home or sick. And Jonathan and Robbie's parents think these boys are like in some sort of weird teenage funk.
Right.
But these boys are desperate. They're desperate. They really want the police to find Shaun's body and arrest Rod, but they don't want to be involved in any of it.
Right.
For 3 weeks, Jonathan Cash and Robbie Peterson are terrified of Rod. They feel horribly guilty, but they don't know what to do.
Right.
They didn't think when he said he was going to kill Shaun that he would actually do it. And when he did, they're stuck between these feelings of being so afraid of Rod and being loyal to him.
Yeah.
Because Rod was their friend.
Right.
And Rod was acting like his same old self at school. But Jonathan and Robbie aren't doing so great. And Jonathan finally tells 3 coworkers at the Marshall's department store where he worked nights as a stock boy about what had happened.
Okay.
And one of the people who caught the bits and pieces of this story was 23-year-old Laurie Allen. And she called the police anonymously on December 9th, but her information was too vague. She didn't have enough of the story. And the police sort of disregarded it.
Really?
Yeah.
As serious as this whole thing was, and they had search crews out, and they...
Yeah.
Oh, gee whiz.
Well, I can imagine that they were getting all sorts of tips and calls.
Well, that's true, too. Yeah.
And they're just trying to sift through them. I mean, I'm sort of, I get it on the police because I get it that the police were like, okay, whatever. Because she didn't have enough for them to really do anything with.
Right.
But then just after midnight on December 10th, 20 days after Rod had murdered Shaun, Jonathan Cash slips out of his parents' house in the middle of the night, rode his bike by the light of the moon 1.5 miles to the hilltop in the pits where Shaun's body was still in the leaves and snow.
Jeez.
And Jonathan stood there for 10 minutes memorizing the nearest landmarks. Then he pedaled home and wrote a 2-page letter to the Canton Police Department, letting them know where the body was and saying that Rod was the killer. Quote, Shaun Ouillette did not run away. He wasn't in trouble with anyone, and he didn't take a bus anywhere. He went to Rod's house to buy bottle rockets, unaware of Rod's plan to kill him. There were only 2 other people besides Rod that know of his action, and I shouldn't even told you this because he said he would kill us if we told. I was not there when Rod killed Shaun, but he told me of it that night. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner or in person, but I'm afraid that you will make me an accessory to the fact, and I wish to remain anonymous. Between Sawyer Avenue and the new industrial park off Sherman Street, you will find Shaun in the woods at the top of a hill. At the bottom of this hill is old concrete pipes, and also from the top of the hill, you can see a red house, end quote.
Wow.
So that's the letter he wrote.
Okay.
And the police get the letter at 2 p.m. on December 11th, and they found Shaun's body that afternoon. Then after seeing a TV news story, Laurie Allen calls the police and tells them, that letter you got? Jonathan Cash was the author of that letter.
Oh, wow.
And on December 13th, Robbie and Jonathan tell their story to the police. They get a search warrant for Rod's house, and they get this bat. And the lab revealed that there were remnants of blood and hair on the bat, not to mention a bone fragment was embedded in the bat that belonged to Shaun.
Wow.
Rod is 14 years old. He's arrested. He showed zero emotion as they took him away to the police station. The community is shocked. But after his arrest, Rod underwent a series of interviews with psychiatrists, go figure, and his case was really puzzling to them because there was no history of mental illness in this family, his brain scan was normal, and he didn't suffer from anything specific like schizophrenia. They labeled it as chronic atypical psychosis stemming from physiological dysfunction or emotional deprivation or both.
Okay. It pretty much covers all their bases.
Which means God only really knows.
Yeah. Or he's knucking futs.
Yeah, I mean, even residents, when they're doing the residency program, if they don't know what's wrong with somebody, they call a patient a gork. God only really knows.
Okay.
And that's seriously kind of where they are with this kid. But the Norfolk County prosecutors didn't care that he was a kid. They were determined to try Rod as an adult for first-degree murder.
Man.
In January 1987, Janine Quinn, who is Shaun's mom, recounted to the Associated Press 2 horrible things that had happened. She's being harassed. One night, she discovered the words red rom, which is Stephen King's The Shining.
Yep.
It was scrawled in shaving cream above Shaun's bedroom window. Then in June of that same year, another sinister act happens. Somebody hurled a rock through the family's window with a message on it saying, quote, Yvonne is next, end quote. Ooh. Yvonne is Shaun's sister with cerebral palsy.
Man.
I mean, hasn't this family been through enough?
Yeah, big time.
On July 5th, 1987, Rod Matthews was indicted for first-degree murder in Norfolk County. That same year, Janine Quinn, Shaun's mom, testified in favor of a bill before the state legislature. She proposed that the law aim to give judges the authority to sentence youths aged 14 to 17 as adults for crimes such as murder or vehicular homicide and manslaughter was a really good idea. So Rod's attorney, John White, petitioned the court to either dismiss the indictment or transfer the case back to juvenile court. He also informed the judge of his intention to present an insanity defense at trial. And Rod actually made legal history when he became the youngest person ever in the United States to plead guilty by reason of insanity.
Oh, really?
Well, back then, yeah. I don't know if anybody's done it since, but for the record,
Okay.
On October 13th, 1987, the judge announced that he would take the motion to dismiss the murder charge under advisement. The defense argued that Rod had been diagnosed with atypical psychosis and that his mental illness severely impaired his judgment and behavior at the time of the murder. He just didn't know what he was doing. Now, there are all kinds of theories out there. In December of 1987, Dennis Clark, president of the Citizens Commission on Human Rights International, told the United Press International, the UPI, that withdrawal from Ritalin could have devastating effects on a child. And using Rod's case as an example, he described it as a textbook case of psychosis induced by Ritalin and exacerbated by withdrawal. He noted that Rod was just 7 days into withdrawal when the tragic events unfolded.
Okay.
So apparently Rod was reportedly exhibiting classic symptoms of amphetamine-induced delusions, including intoxication, delirium, and a delusional disorder. And withdrawing from such drugs isn't something that can be done cold turkey without serious repercussions.
Right.
Now, this claim is particularly striking because it essentially attributes the murder to the drug, to Ritalin, and the psychological turmoil caused by his abrupt withdrawal from the drug. So going cold turkey.
Right.
That's why he murdered a child.
Okay, whatever.
Now, when testimony began on March 2nd, 1987, the prosecution contended that Rod Matthews meticulously planned the murder for nearly a month and even compiled a list of potential victims. Don't forget, he told his friends there were 2 other guys he'd planned on killing first.
Right, yeah.
And the Norfolk County Assistant DA, Peter Casey, stated that Rod was deliberate in his planning and executed it with precision. It was premeditated. This wasn't a moment of rage or spontaneous altercation that got out of hand. It was very calculated, and the detailed planning and the methodical execution and even the victim shortlist painted a chilling picture of a crime that was, quote, anything but impulsive.
Exactly.
Now, the defense portrayed Rod Matthews as a mentally ill teenager from a deeply troubled home, saying that he was suffering from a severe mental disorder that was further aggravated by the Ritalin. And they pointed to Rod's long history of bizarre and erratic behavior, barking like a dog, that whole kind of thing. Yeah.
Right.
And they even say, listen, this is just a kid, and he asked for help prior to the murder. They're talking about this coach.
Yeah.
They're going to lay this at this coach's feet.
It's everybody else's fault, but
Yeah. Now, Rod's friends, Jonathan Cash and Robbie Peterson, they both testified that Rod began talking about killing someone around Halloween. And over the following weeks, Rod meticulously devised this plan. He was going to lure his victim to a wooded area and then bludgeon them with a baseball bat. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, he told them, this is what's going to happen. And that is what happened.
Right.
And according to Robbie Peterson, Rod even discussed a gruesome follow-up, cutting off the victim's legs and discarding them. And that Rod chose Shaun because he would be, quote, the least missed as he didn't have many friends, end quote.
Wow.
Jonathan Cash revealed that in the month leading up to the murder, he, Rod, and Robbie had at least 5 discussions about which classmate would make the ideal victim.
Wow.
Yeah. And both of these kids thought that Rod was really fixated on this idea, but they still didn't think he was serious about doing it. Because even though he was saying, I'm going to lure this victim into the woods, I'm going to beat him with a baseball bat, this is how I'm going to dispose of the body, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was also saying things like, maybe I'll take a classmate to the back of this mall and I will mace them and then stab them to death.
True.
But honestly, this case was less about the testimony of these boys who knew him and more about the dueling doctors that took the stand. Dr. John Dagno, a Harvard psychologist who conducted 2 whole sessions with Rod, testified that Rod spoke in a flat, robotic monotone during their evaluations, a behavior indicative of severe mental disorders.
Okay.
He believed that Rod had been experiencing prolonged transient psychotic episodes. Because during their sessions, Rod admitted that he had become consumed by this obsession with killing somebody. And he also diagnosed him with several psychological disorders, noting his inability to conform to social norms or even feel remorse.
Okay.
He also highlighted Rod's habit of smiling inappropriately during serious moments as a potential sign of schizophrenia. So one doctor has said he's not schizophrenic. Now this one is like, well, he's smiling at these inappropriate times because that is a sign of schizophrenia.
Okay.
Then the jury was presented with the letter Rod had written to his health teacher just a month before the murder, which said, quote, my problem is that I like to do crazy things. I like to light fires. Lately, I want to kill people. I hate and I want to light houses on fire. What should I do? End quote. And this letter, according to the defense, was evidence that Rod was trying to find help. He was seeking help before the crime. But yet, don't forget, the coach actually asked him, said, are you serious about this?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, he just shrugs it off.
Right.
No. And he goes, and the coach says, good, because these are both felonies, right?
Right.
Now, defense attorney John White also claimed that this coach, Frank Tricomi, was aware of this disturbing letter that Rod wrote, but chose to ignore it. And the coach testified that he didn't act on the letter because he wasn't certain that Rod was serious, because Rod shrugged and walked away.
Sure.
And he admitted that he never told the school about this letter until after Rod's arrest. I think this guy is just trying to really... He was doing his best.
Right.
He's around 14 and 15-year-old kids. And it's not like he doesn't know boys.
Right.
He's a coach. He's the football coach for the high school football team.
Sure.
So he's reading Rod and thinking he's reading what he's saying and his body language. You're joking, right?
Yeah, and this is a totally different era. I mean, this is school shootings and all this stuff. So, yeah, why would you think?
Yeah. Yeah. Today, huge red flag.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
At the time, he's like, this kid is just whatever. He's the class clown. He's a prankster, whatever.
He's looking for attention.
Yeah. You're looking for it to move along, go to class kind of thing, right?
Right.
Rod's mom testified that his behavioral issues had long been a source of frustration for their family, and she told the court that in the fall of 1986 that Rod exhibited signs of an unhealthy fascination with fire. Yeah, because he's lighting newspapers on fire in your house.
Yeah.
2 psychiatrists testified for the defense, but reached completely different conclusions about Rod's mental state during the murder. So they're bringing in all these experts. Dr. Susan Wolf diagnosed Rod with a chronic and subtle mental illness, arguing that while he understood the difference between right and wrong, his condition impaired his ability to adhere to the law. He knows right from wrong, but his condition keeps him from doing the right thing.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And in contrast to that, Dr. Norman Bernstein testified that Rod couldn't stop himself from killing Shaun, claiming that although Rod understood the criminality of his actions, he was unable to control them. So he knows right from wrong, but he just can't control himself.
Oh.
Or he knows right from wrong, but he just doesn't care.
Right.
A court-appointed psychiatrist, Dr. Marcel Kinsborn, concluded that Rod suffered from conduct disorder, but did not show signs of psychosis, meaning he's just a bad kid.
Right.
Dr. Kinsborn testified that standard doses of Ritalin would not cause violent behavior, but he did concede that the drug might not completely prevent volatility. Another expert suggested that Ritalin could have worsened Rod's ability to control his impulses. And this same expert testified that Rod's decision to kill may have been influenced by watching the disturbing documentary Faces of Death. Well, duh.
Yeah, exactly.
The boys, his best friends, said this all started happening around Halloween and after Halloween when he watched this documentary.
Right.
In his closing arguments, the defense attorney John White urged the jury to reflect on the expert testimony that Rod was suffering from a chronic mental disorder at the time of the murder. Quote, "There isn't one of us who hasn't looked at a child and wondered what was going on in their mind. That is the central challenge of this case. What was going on in Rod Matthews' head?" End quote. On the other hand, the assistant DA, Peter Casey, painted a really different picture.
Can you imagine that?
Saying that Rod acted with deliberate premeditation, extreme atrocity, and cruelty. He argued that Rod knew right from wrong, methodically planned the crime, and even attempted to cover it up by fabricating false stories.
Right.
So if you don't know right from wrong, why would you lie about it?
Exactly.
On March 10th, 1988, the jury found Rod Matthews guilty of second-degree murder as an adult.
Oh, wow.
He was sentenced to life in prison. Now, following the verdict, Rod's parents told the press that their son was mentally ill and should be receiving treatment in a hospital and not serving time in a prison. So at just 15 years old, Rod Matthews became the youngest inmate in the state.
Man.
He was subjected to a 60 to 90-day evaluation to determine how he would be housed. What do you do with a 15-year-old?
Yeah.
You can't put him in Gen Pop.
Nope.
But during this time, Rod was kept in protective custody. But beyond that, little information has surfaced about how he was managed until he turned 18. Now, Rod's first parole hearing was held on December 6, 2001, but he was denied. His second hearing was on May 15, 2007, and it ended with the same result. And although he was eligible for a third hearing in 2012, Rod postponed it. Then finally, on March 29, 2016, during his third parole hearing, Rod admitted, per WBUR, quote, "As sick as it sounds, I wanted to prove that I could murder him," end quote.
Wow.
Now, Shaun's mother, Janine Quinn, has consistently spoken out against Rod's parole, citing concerns for the community's safety. And at this 2016 hearing, Janine told the CBS station in Boston, quote, "I have forgiven you, Rod, but there's a difference between forgive and forget. I have survived this because I chose to forgive." And Rod was denied parole again.
Wow.
Then on June 8th, 2021, Rod was up for parole once again. And this time he delivered an opening statement apologizing for his crime and expressing remorse. He acknowledged the profound impact on Shaun's family, his own family, and the broader community. Rod admitted to starting fires as a young kid. He was at least 9 years old when he started setting fires,
Right.
between 30 and 50 of them, which he said gave him a sense of relief. And when he was asked by the parole board about his motivation for the murder, he struggled to give them a good answer, saying that his family life was tumultuous in his really nice house with his pool table and his pool in the backyard.
Right.
And he said that his father's infidelity was a disruption that contributed to his emotional detachment and his capacity for violence.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. He said he wanted to murder Shaun, but at the time he lacked the emotional depth to understand or care about the consequences. Okay. And despite his statements, the parole board denied his parole.
Good.
Once more.
Wow.
However, Rod became eligible again in 2024.
Okay.
November, just a couple months ago.
Right.
Quote, I want the 9-to-5 job. I want to be with my family. I want to take care of my mother. End quote. Then he tells the parole board, I'm not that 14-year-old kid anymore. I'm a 51-year-old mature, responsible adult. End quote. And after serving 37 years behind bars, Rod Matthews, who was now 51 years old, was granted parole on November 6th, 2024.
Wow.
Quote, the board concludes that Rod Matthews has demonstrated a level of rehabilitation that would make his release compatible with the welfare of society. End quote. Now, as you might imagine, Shaun's mom was less than happy about it.
Yeah.
Quote, I am frightened right down to my socks. I'm frightened, end quote.
Yeah.
She thinks that Rod is still dangerous. Quote, there is such a thing as evil, and I believe he is evil, end quote.
You can't change a leopard's spots.
The family, along with the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office and the Canton Police Chief, Helena Rafferty, they opposed Rod being paroled during his hearings. And despite these objections, the parole board granted him his parole. And the decision has left Shaun's family feeling very betrayed and fearful, which I completely understand.
Yeah.
So he's sent to prison at 15, been there 37 years. I can see where Shaun's family wanted him to stay there for the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm.
But Rod is out.
Wow.
And I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah.
You know, email me. Tell me what you think about this case.
Right.
But that is the case of Rod Matthews and his murder of poor Shaun Ouillette. And that's all I have to say about that. For nearly 7 years, Jane Doe has lived in the shadows, her past buried deep beneath layers of secrecy and silence. After completing more than was asked of her in her last assignment for the enigmatic Kaiwolf project, Jane Doe vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of dead bodies and unanswered questions. But now, as the specter of her past returns with a vengeance, Jane finds herself thrust back into a world she thought she'd left behind forever. When her former sins come knocking on her door, Jane is faced with an impossible choice: continue to hide in the shadows, or once again take up arms against the forces that threaten to tear apart the fabric of society. With enemies lurking around every corner and allies who may not be what they seem, Jane must rely on her wits, training, and her unyielding determination to survive. And while trust is a luxury she cannot afford, Jane must confront the truth about herself and her past. As the clock ticks, she realizes that the line between family, friend, and foe are razor thin, and in the end, the only person she can rely on is herself. Jane Doe 4 Charlotte is available September 24th, 2024. No name, no regrets, no mercy.
You know, it's a difficult case. I mean, yeah, he was a 14-year-old kid, but he murdered another kid in cold blood, and he knew what he was doing.
And it was completely premeditated.
Yeah. So
And his only excuse, even when he's older in life, is that, you know, his home life was bad.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, he mapped out the whole thing. So should he have gotten parole? I mean, in my opinion, no.
That's why I said, I don't know how I feel about it. But I would be interested to hear how everybody else feels about it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel sorry for Shaun's family.
Yes, absolutely.
Good Lord. First of all, they feel like justice wasn't served. And number two, they're afraid.
Yeah.
And I would be too.
Yeah.
Because,
sure.
after what he did and serving 37 years, he had a lot of time to sit there and
think,
fume and, yeah.
Yeah.
And, of course, he's blaming everyone else, so I'm sure, whatever.
I did try to find out where he is or what he's doing, but there was no information.
Oh, well, okay. That one bugs me. Let me have something that's a little lighter called Bless Your Heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right, number one, I'm calling I'm a Turtle.
I'm a Turtle.
Yep. Well, I guess it's safe to say we know what this guy's favorite cartoon was. A Lafayette man thought robbing a convenience store wearing a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle mask would be a great idea. Maybe it's me, but it seems like you wouldn't want to stand out if you're going to rob a place. The turtle in disguise was 18-year-old Lacorian Detron, according to Lafayette Police Department.
Okay.
What an employee thought was a gun in a plastic bag turned out to be a trusty old stick wrapped in plastic.
He robbed with a stick.
Yes.
That was his weapon? Okay.
Yeah. It's hard to tell from the police video what it was, but he's supposed to be a Ninja Turtle, but he's not wearing a colored bandana.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I guess in the I don't know, teenage,
yes.
They have different guys.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, that's above my pay grade. Anyway, Lafayette Police Department said the suspect went behind the counter to attempt to open the register, but was unsuccessful. Needless to say, the thief managed to steal 2 wallets that were under the counter before fleeing from the scene. I guess his turtle power wasn't working that day because he got caught a short time later and convicted.
Scotty could hold up a convenience store with a stick. That's his favorite thing is a stick.
All right, number 2, I'm calling Go Speed Racer.
Okay.
A grown man in Indiana is a bit embarrassed after state troopers arrested him for driving a toy car while under the influence. According to this report, 51-year-old John McKee was pulled over by Indiana State Police while driving a Power Wheel down the street at 9 p.m. on Wednesday. Yes, that kind of Power Wheel, the type you may have had when you were 5.
Yeah.
The trooper saw the man driving in the road with no lights or reflectors, making the vehicle not legal for the road.
Not to mention the fact it's kind of small.
Yeah, the trooper stopped him and noticed he was showing signs of impairment. The trooper then gave McKee a series of field sobriety tests, which he failed. Blood tests at a local hospital determined McKee was, in fact, under the influence of meth and marijuana.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, he was charged and convicted. But my point is, can you imagine you're driving down the street and you see them stopped on the side of the road and he's giving him a sobriety test and there's a little power car sitting there?
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, the Indiana State Police.
Oh, they don't mess around.
They don't mess around.
Nope, not at all. Not at all. All right. And number 3, enjoy the view.
Enjoy the view.
Yes. According to reports, employees at Arlington Auto Wrecking in Akron, Ohio, took things into their own hands when they were fed up with thieves breaking in and stealing from them.
Okay.
They were stealing catalytic converters and other valuable parts that are taken off vehicles frequently at this location. That's hard to say. When a suspect they believe had broken in and stolen before was stealing from another vehicle on the lot, the employees jumped into action.
Oh, my gosh.
This person had been caught and let go once before, and the employees claimed they caught him a second time, but he escaped. This time, they had him, though. They brought the forklift over to the vehicle he was in and lifted it 20 feet into the air. Then they refused to lower the vehicle until the police arrived.
No, get out of that one.
Yep. Here's the best part. When an employee called 911, even the operator on the line got a laugh out of the situation. When police arrived, they easily took the suspect into custody.
The dispatcher's like, he's where?
Yeah. Hey, guys, get a load of this. Yeah. The suspect that was arrested was identified as 26-year-old Alexander, and I love this name, Funk.
Mr. Funk, the jig is up.
Mr. Herman, Mr. Pee Wee Herman. When he was arrested, he was also in possession of a backpack with a sawzall blades and other hand tools. When officers asked why he had those tools on him, this is just amazing. He claimed he was using them to steal copper pipes.
I'm not here for the catalytic converters.
No, it's just for copper pipes.
I'm due down the street
Yep.
at a house to steal a copper pipe.
Yeah, Funk was arrested for criminal trespassing and possessing criminal tools.
Aw, bless his heart.
Bless your hearts. Good Lord.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, all you got to do is go to hitchtohomicide.com. And when you get there, there's a pull-down menu. And while you're there, you can also suggest a case or tell us about your brush with true crime.
Please do.
That is my husband out there, my amazing husband out there who's winterized this house. We are ready for Blair.
Bring it on. And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitch to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.